Welcome to the Explainer. You know, we love our pets. But what happens when a pet isn't really a product of domestication, but a creature of the wild? Today, we're going to explore a series of really tragic stories that show the fatal consequences of ignoring an animal's untamed instincts. And that really brings us to the central question behind every single story we're going to cover. We're all drawn to the power and beauty of exotic animals. But can a bond of affection ever truly conquer millions of years of instinct? It's a tough question. So here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll talk about our fascination with the wild. Then we'll look at what happens when you have predators in the living room. After that, we'll uncover some unexpected hidden dangers. Then we'll see what happens when instinct just takes over. And finally, we'll face the unbreakable laws of nature. So let's start with the big why. Why do these stories even happen? Well, it seems to stem from this deep, almost primal human desire we have to connect with the wild. And for some people, that means bringing a piece of the untamable right through the front door. This brings us right to our first set of stories, and these involve animals that are, well, undeniably powerful apex predators. In these cases, you'd think the danger would have been obvious, but love and familiarity, they created this tragic false sense of security. Our first story takes us to Minnesota at a 52-year-old woman named Cynthia Lee Gamble. Now, she was no novice. She was an experienced animal handler who kept a magnificent Bengal tiger right on her property. And listen, this wasn't just any tiger. We're talking about a 227-kilogram predator. That's 500 pounds of muscle, teeth, and instinct. Just try to imagine an animal of that power living in a domestic setting. It's almost unimaginable. And here's the truly tragic irony. Cynthia wasn't just some amateur enthusiast. She had spent decades of her professional life caring for tigers at the local zoo. If anyone should have understood the risks, you'd think it was her. But expertise is no match for nature. When she didn't show up for work for 2 days, her worried colleagues went to her home, and they found her in the tiger's enclosure. The wild animal had killed and partially consumed her. A whole lifetime of care, just erased in a single instinctual moment. From a tiger in Minnesota, we're now going to travel all the way to South Africa to meet Marius Els. He had this truly unique relationship with a hippopotamus he named Humphrey, an animal he had raised and genuinely believed was his friend. And this right here really gets to the heart of the emotional trap. Marius didn't just see a wild animal. He saw a companion, a family member. He would ride on Humphrey's back for photos. He was projecting human love and friendship onto one of Africa's most dangerous and territorial animals. That illusion was brutally shattered. In May of 2012, the 6-year-old hippo attacked Marius, mauling him repeatedly. His body was found submerged in the very same river where they used to play. He had put his trust in an animal that operates purely on instinct. But the danger isn't always from a 500-pound tiger or a 2-ton hippo. Sometimes the deadliest threats are much, much quieter, and their nature is just fundamentally misunderstood by their owners. Over in England, 31-year-old Dan Brandon was a passionate snake enthusiast. He absolutely adored his collection of reptiles, including a 2.5-meter African rock python he described as his lovely pet. So to understand what happened, you have to understand how a python kills. There's no venom. Its power is purely in its embrace. It coils around its prey, and with every single exhale, it tightens its grip. It's a silent, overwhelming, mechanical force. And the threat isn't always from a lone animal. In Pennsylvania, Sandra Piovisson lived with an entire pack. She had raised 10 wolves from pups, treating them just like they were domestic dogs. And this highlights a really critical distinction. A dog is the product of thousands of years of domestication, literally designed to coexist with humans. A wolf, however, remains fundamentally wild. You can raise it in your home, but you just can't erase its innate pack instincts or its predatory nature. This next case is particularly unsettling because it shows that even in the most common domesticated household pets, those core survival instincts are never truly gone. They just lie dormant, waiting for the right, or in this case, the wrong circumstances. In a quiet house in Pennsylvania, a 74-year-old man living with his elderly mother suffered a fatal heart attack. Unable to move or call for help, his 94-year-old mother died of dehydration a few days later. Weeks passed. Inside the home with them were their 14 pet cats. With no food source, they reverted to their most basic survival instinct, For the cats, their owners were no longer companions. They were simply a means of survival. Our final story is perhaps the most famous and harrowing of all, because it involves a primate who was raised to be more human than chimpanzee, blurring the lines in the most dangerous way imaginable. Travis the chimpanzee was a local celebrity. He had starred in commercials, could drink from a wine glass, and would sit and watch television with his owner, Sandra Harold. He was, for all intents and purposes, treated like a human child, which made his sudden explosion of violence all the more terrifying. When Sandra's friend Charla Nash came to visit, something in Travis just snapped. It's believed to have been a fit of jealousy, and he launched a vicious, sustained attack. See, chimpanzees in the wild target the face and hands of their rivals, and that's exactly what Travis did, causing life-altering injuries to Charla before police arrived and were forced to shoot him. So when you look back at all these stories, a clear pattern emerges. Wild animals operate on a different set of rules, governed by instinct, not human emotion. And what we've seen is that our love, our experience, and our care, they just cannot overwrite that fundamental nature. Crossing the line between observer and owner is a gamble with devastating stakes. And beyond these personal tragedies, there's a much broader consequence. When owners can no longer handle these animals, sometimes they just release them into the wild. This act introduces invasive species that can cause catastrophic damage to local ecosystems. This leaves us with a final, difficult question. Our fascination with the wild is natural. But in our desire to get closer, where do we draw the line? At what point does our affection turn an animal from a wild creature into a wild captive and a home into a cage?